The discovery of giant bones out west made dinosaurs an all-American business, for America was to produce some of the biggest and best specimens. That produced conflict, Hollywood blockbusters, huge profits, and made dinosaurs part of American culture. Today at the museum in Canton, Ohio, a new dinosaur is being unveiled. The Allosaurus, cousin of the fearsome T-Rex, is an all-snarling, all-moving wonder of computer technology.
Okay, come on, Allison, we're gonna go work the dinosaur.
Dinosaur discovery is a story of money and enthusiasm, and with it, scientific truth, pursued by a dedicated band of dinosaur detectives who retain a unique pioneering spirit even today.
The Allosaurus has become the mascot of Discover World. The major role of the entire community here is to educate, and that's why we exist as a museum. So boys and girls in elementary and secondary schools in the United States will be able to come here and receive part of their education.
Here in America, in 1877, the frontier was moving west. Gold fever had gripped the country, and not so well known, so had dinosaur fever. Here in Wyoming and in neighboring Colorado, dinosaur bones were being found by the ton. And partner, there was money in them there bones. The discoveries ignited one of the bitterest, nastiest, orneriest feuds in the history of dinosaur excavation.
Opening up the West for gold prospectors and dinosaur hunters posed a problem for anyone seeking fame and fortune. The West was still Indian territory. While General Custer fought and died at the Little Bighorn, dinosaur hunters were at work, even as the battle raged near them. They crept around the perimeter of the battle to dig out the dinosaur remains before a rival could arrive on the scene. Hard on the heels of the early dinosaur hunters came railway workers. They too found giant bones in their thousands as the iron horse cut through the rocky terrain of the Midwest. Here at Como Bluff in Wyoming, paleontologists, or dinosaur detectives, still search for dinosaur bones. Each new find reveals more clues about dinosaurs and their lifestyle. Bob Backer, a modern dinosaur detective, has retraced the steps of the early pioneers. He's driven by that same spirit and thirst for knowledge that was born 100 years ago.
I think the secret is the spirit of the times. When the railroad was coming through here and the surveymen were coming through, there was the sense of this as the frontier, not just a political or an economic frontier, but this was a scientific frontier.
How did these old railroad men know that they were finding dinosaur bones, for heaven's sakes?
You know, they didn't. When they first found the giant bones here at Como, they thought the rocks were much younger than they really were. They thought they were in the age of mammals. And so they sent a telegram back to New Haven, to Yale, and they said, we have these giant bones, and we think they're for this huge giant ground sloth.
Two East Coast professors, Edward Drinker Cope and O.C. Marsh, both recognized the finds for what they were. The huge dinosaur bones dwarfed anything yet found. Both men had a passion for dinosaurs. Both were rich men who could pay handsomely to acquire them. They had started out as friends, but by the time of the dinosaur bonanza, both were bitter rivals. Each man used his money and driving ambition to outwit the other. It was just a feud until 1877, when Marsh acquired a staggering 30 tons of dinosaur. The Bone Wars had begun.
They let their discovery be known back east, but was there a rivalry and you say a gold rush?
Incredible one.
Was it really coming out
Incredible
here?
one. The two men, Professor Cope in Philadelphia, Professor Marsh in New Haven, both wanted the bones from here. Marsh got here first, and his men worked up and down Como Bluff and got, as I said, the easy bone, but they got a lot of good easy bone.
For both Cope and Marsh, it was a fight to the finish. Neither was willing to see good specimens fall into the hands of the other. They would rather destroy finds than see their rival get them. Stories still have it that each man ordered his henchmen to steal the finds of his rival, and what they could not steal, they smashed.
Cope hired two men to rustle a dinosaur, the Hubble brothers. They came over the cliff. When Marsh's men were at that end, Cope's rustlers came over that end. They got one dinosaur, but a good one. It's the big meat eater mound to death in New York, the Allosaurus.
Well, was anybody killed in these dinosaur wars?
No, I don't think any shots were fired in earnest, except in print.
Yeah.
If people could be sued for scientific libel, it would have happened.
By the end of the Bone Wars, Cope and Marsh had between them collected and named over 120 new species of dinosaur. At Como Bluff, small plant eaters like Dryosaurus and Laosaurus, bigger ones like the plated Stegosaurus, and the giants Diplodocus and Apatosaurus. Then there were the meat eaters, Ceratosaurus and the giant Allosaurus, for whom no plant eater, however large, was safe. American dinosaurs were on the map. The dinosaur bonanza, fueled by Cope and Marsh, lasted for 12 frantic years and was made all the more intense because of the rarity of complete skeletons. Even today, the chances of a major skeleton being discovered are still slim. For a dinosaur to survive for millions of years requires a great slice of luck. As a geologist, Christine Turner understands those odds very well. For our benefit, she pretends to be a dinosaur and explains how it died, was buried, and finally resurfaced as a fossil today.
I used to be a dinosaur that roamed around the margins of the stream. But maybe I died by trying to cross the river. Maybe I died by a predator. Perhaps I died during a drought. But whatever happened, I got disarticulated. My bones fell apart, and I'm now a femur bone. Okay, now I'm a dinosaur bone. I was beached on this sandbar during a violent storm that carried the bone in a flash flood down the river and washed me up on the beach, and I landed up on the sandbar. Now with time, as the water receded and waned, the sand would just deposit right on top of me and bury me. After that, additional layers were deposited on top of me. And so I was eventually 8,000 feet below the surface. How did I get exhumed at the surface? Well, following all of this deposition, there was a period of uplift and mountain building. And as the river cut through the mountain and created the canyon, it cut through the same layer that the dinosaur bone was in and exposed that bone.
Dinosaur remains in just a few places still reveal a treasure trove. Some are so full of bones they've been left in place and had their own museum built around them.
Behind me, we see the surface of a 150-million-year-old sandbar, originally horizontal and now tilted up and dipping to the south. And strewn across the face of that sandbar are the remains of approximately 10 to 12 different species of dinosaurs. The most common dinosaurs here are brontosaurs, very large, long-necked, long-tailed herbivores. but there are two carnivorous dinosaurs known, the large meat-eater Allosaurus and the slightly smaller meat-eater Ceratosaurus.
These deposits, rich as they are only a glimpse into the long reign of the dinosaurs. Over a changing calendar, 150 million years long, species came and went. Reading the record is not easy for modern-day dinosaur hunters.
Well, how does each of the dinosaurs found here fit into the general worldwide picture?
That's a really neat question, and we got a graphic that'll illustrate that. Now, the way I look at it, the whole history of dinosaurs is like taking a movie through time. In a place like Como Bluff, you have layer after layer after layer, each with its own dinosaurs. It's like getting a burst of frames of motion picture of how the dinosaurs came, flourished, went extinct. Any one place in the world, you don't have the whole history of dinosaurs. In fact, you don't even have the whole history of one family of dinosaurs. You just have a little intense burst of documents and fossils.
How many millions of years are represented from the bottom there to the top of this thing?
Yeah, tough question. We don't yet have radioactive beds that can give us a nice hard number. But by comparing the fossils we get at the bottom of the section and the top, it's about 10 million years from where we're sitting to those black beds. So all of this history of flourishing and extinction and turnover is played out over roughly, well, that'd be about 2 million dinosaur generations, 10 million chronological years.
Do you have in your mind's eye what it looked like around here at that time?
Before we started working here, the reconstruction was of a giant swamp, sort of like the Amazon basin or the Congo basin or a part of New Jersey I grew up in, just swamps and wet soil. But when we studied the fish, the only common fish were lungfish that could breathe air during the dry season. The turtles are all pretty small. If this were a giant swamp, there'd be huge turtles. And we found little lumps of rock, like that one, that were cemented with lime. And these lime lumps grow in the soil during the dry season. So now we know the classic picture is totally wrong. This wasn't a swamp. This was a giant, hot floodplain with a long dry season, maybe like Australia or Peninsula India today.
Today we know more about the world in which dinosaurs lived and the animals themselves. The giant plant-eater Diplodocus at 90 feet dwarfed the 30-foot predator Allosaurus. But the hunter would have to be cunning. One wrong move and the victim would live to see another day. Much of what we know about Diplodocus is the result of American philanthropy on the grand scale.
Not long after the bone wars were over, another American millionaire became fascinated by dinosaurs. Andrew Carnegie, who made a fortune out of steel, read a story in the New York Journal of 1898. The headline said, "Biggest dinosaur ever found." Andrew Carnegie wanted it. He wanted it for his museum in Pittsburgh. What Andrew Carnegie wanted, he usually got. He immediately dispatched a man with a check for $10,000 and the orders, "Buy it."
In 1895, Carnegie had made his fortune in railroads and steel, and he decided to give to Pittsburgh a palace of culture. And the palace had 4 columns. One was art, another was literature, another was music, and the 4th was science. And in 1898, science meant dinosaurs.
Carnegie's money bought him the best bone hunters of the day, but no amount of searching, it seemed, would unearth the skeleton he yearned for. 2 months later, his investment paid off. Carnegie's diggers struck lucky, very lucky.
What they found was this, a giant toe bone of a dinosaur sticking out of the rock. And they got very excited because when they started excavating the rock from around the toe bone, they found that the toe bones led to the ankle bones, and the ankle bones led to the shin bones of the dinosaur, and the shin bones led to the proverbial thigh bones of the dinosaur. It was the most perfect July 4th that any paleontologist has ever had, And Carnegie got exactly what he paid for, an 84-foot colossal dinosaur. It was named Star-Spangled Dinosaur because it was found on July 4th, Independence Day. The dinosaur Diplodocus became not only the toast of Pittsburgh and the toast of North America, but it became the toast of the world. It became so wildly popular. A tavern song was written in honor of Diplodocus, which only had one verse, at least one verse that has survived, that went something like, "The crowned heads of Europe all make a royal fuss over Uncle Andy and his old Diplodocus." Uncle Andy must have loved it. He paid for it, and he got everything he paid for and more. Casts of Diplodocus carnegii were made for and installed in Paris, in Vienna, in Bologna, in Berlin, in Leningrad, in La Plata, in Mexico City, and Buenos Aires. That really set the stage for the popularity of dinosaurs and of the great studies on dinosaurs. Here was tangible evidence to all the people of Europe of the terrific dinosaur finds that were occurring in North America.
The huge bones of the giant dinosaurs inspired not only the museums. At the turn of the century, the motion picture, the cinema, was just coming into its own. And a young animator named Winsor McKay produced one of the very first animated pictures. It was called Gertie the Dinosaur. For the first time, showed the public what dinosaurs really were, moving, living creatures. And they gazed at them in awe and amazement. Something I'm going to do right now.
Come on out, Gertie, and make a pretty bow. Gertie, down her jumbo. Gertie will now show that she isn't afraid of me and will take me for a ride. Alley up.
Audiences everywhere were spellbound by Gertie the Dinosaur. But that was soon eclipsed when, in 1909, an even bigger giant came to light. A German expedition found in East Africa a dinosaur so big it could easily look over the top of a 4-story building. The skeleton was named Brachiosaurus. Brought back to Germany, it remains today the star of the Berlin Museum. The giant creature is a feat of mechanical engineering. Today, dinosaur detectives like David Norman still marvel at the size of the bones and how they were designed.
This was a real giant amongst dinosaurs. It was about 75 feet long. It probably weighed somewhere between 30 and 40 tons. And its head towered some 30 feet above the ground. It was a true giant. The foot has a rather remarkable design. It consists of these very long bones that are tied together. And instead of lying flat on the ground, as you expect in our feet, the bones are actually tied together vertically. And they're held together with bands of really powerful ligaments that ran from one to the other. On the end of this very tubular sort of foot are very short toes, very stubby toes, rather like that of an elephant. So what you've got here is a classically designed foot for bearing lots and lots of weight. And you need that sort of foot if you weigh 30 or 40 tons. You can see the way in which they supported their weight by looking back at the hind limb here. You have a beautiful vertical pillar, which is classically designed to bear an enormous amount of weight in these creatures. So all in all, for bearing their own weight, they have a fantastic design, which is ready-made for walking around on land. What about the neck? because that really is spectacular. If you look at the simple design of the neck, then you've got beneath it a series of bony rods with muscles attached. So the best comparison that you can use for a neck of that type is really a crane, where the jib is formed by the skeleton itself, and then the hawsers are formed by the muscles and the tendons that actually operate the neck and move it from side to side or up and down in a very precise way. It's a very simple and rather elegant mechanical design. I mean, all in all, you've got a fantastic animal.
Brachiosaurus means arm lizard. It got its name because of the extraordinary length of its arms, up to 15 feet. These arms gave it a giraffe-like posture, ideal for reaching up into the trees where it would nip off vegetation using chisel-shaped teeth. Studies of the bone tell us that unlike modern reptiles, it grew fast, achieving its huge size in a few short years. Today, even bigger dinosaurs than the Berlin specimen are slowly being uncovered. The focus has shifted back to America. Here at the Dry Mesa Quarry in Colorado, the bones of the biggest dinosaurs ever are being found. Because of the sheer size of the bones, picks and shovels are no longer enough.
Well, that's something, Doug. Been interesting. Yeah, you bet.
You know, on this bulldozer, we're sitting on top probably of the biggest jigsaw puzzle in the world. This site in Colorado contains the bones of the biggest animals ever to roam the planet. But to get those bones out of this hard rock takes a combination of brute force and surgical precision.
Ken, what's the process of getting bones out of this hard rock here?
First of all, we bring a dozer in and cut this overburden down, and we take it down as close as we dare to the top of the deposit. Well, we start with air tools. We have jackhammers, medium-sized jackhammers, small jackhammers, mainly just to move rock. But when we discover a bone, then we usually move to smaller tools like the awl and the hammer.
Those bones look like they've been varnished or lacquered or something.
They have. As we uncover them, we put shellac on them to help hold pieces in place and make the bone a little stronger until we can work around it and get it collected. These bones have been covered on top with the strips of burlap and plaster. They're now ready to cut loose and turn over so we can cover the underside. And then there'll be a completely wrapped package such as this one. This one's ready to be loaded on the truck and transported back to the university.
Dr. Wade Miller is the current director of the Earth Sciences Museum at Brigham Young University.
That's correct.
Doctor, how big did these things that are being found around here get to be?
The dinosaurs that are coming out of this quarry are, at least not all of them, but some of them larger than any that have been found elsewhere in the world. So that's why we're excited about this site. This one, which has been called Supersaur, is estimated maybe at a length of 120 to 130 feet, making it maybe 30-some feet larger than Diplodocus and proportionally larger all over. So it's a huge dinosaur. What we discovered with this one was that it was hollow inside. Now, that had never been found before. The opening would have been 2 or 3 times this in life. There are little pieces of bone that we found in there, and in other areas we found out that they were actually running vertically, showing that these were used as struts. That is, little pieces to support, much like corrugated cardboard, for the same reason, to have light weight and yet a maximum amount of strength. So again, in answer to your question, what the animal did was to have kind of an engineering marvel here of hollowing out the bone in areas that weren't known before.
So in other words, you can have fairly light bone structure and still have a heavy animal, as you
Right.
suggest, 50 tons or so. This is just another bit of evidence of the fact that paleontology is really a detective job.
It really is. It is. It's like
putting one clue to another and finally coming to a conclusion.
It is. It's exactly like being a detective. And I think that's what makes it so interesting, to be able to find these things and then predict other things and then find more evidence that either supports your prediction or does not, and then you go on to something else.
Jim Jensen has been doing exactly that. He thinks he's found a real winner, a whopper, even for dinosaurs.
That dig's not only fascinating, but the scenery is glorious down the valley.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Jim, how did you get involved in this whole thing of digging up dinosaur bones?
Well, it started when I was a small boy.
Maybe we can sit down over here.
Yeah, let's do.
After 60 years of searching, Dinosaur Jim's unconventional career has finally paid off.
My interest in fossils began when I was a little kid.
Jim is basically a self-tutored man. How in the world did you get recognition from the academic fraternity?
At Brigham Young University, I was curator of the geology department. But I wanted to establish a museum, but they wouldn't let me use the word museum. But I had stationery printed up anyway with the Earth Sciences Museum. I was curator of the Earth Sciences Museum, something that didn't exist. And after several years, I thought I might as well be director, so I promoted myself to director, had some new stationery printed up. Then I would conduct business with the director of the Natural History Museum in Paris. But then your fame doesn't come from sitting in the laboratory picking away at bone. It comes from what you find. In Montana, I found a big skull. I could barely reach the width of it, 6 feet wide and nearly 9 feet long. When I plastered it up, it weighed 1.5 tons, so it's out in the Badlands. So how do I get it out? Well, I worked as a longshoreman handling heavy things. I worked as a truck driver, and I knew how to stomp down fences, so there was no problem getting it out. I continued collecting material, and eventually amounted to a tremendous amount underneath the University Stadium, and I consider that one of my triumphs, is to get some of the athletic department space to put my bones in.
Jim Jensen's big find really is a whopping great dinosaur. He calls it Ultrasaurus, the ultimate in big dinosaurs.
But here, Walter, I'd like to show you something.
Oh, for heaven's sake. What's that?
Well, the New York Giants have never played in the stadium, but had they done so, this is something that might have been left behind.
I suspect you knew we were coming.
Yeah.
But seriously.
To assemble it upright, he needs the university's 60,000-seat stadium. So far, though, he's only found a leg and a shoulder blade. What the whole skeleton would do to the home team is anyone's guess.
What I can't figure out, Jim, is how you figured out what this model of a dinosaur leg should really look like.
This leg belongs to a dinosaur of a group that were plant eaters. They walked around on 4 legs, had a long neck, long tail, so we know the type of dinosaur it was.
So with that size, with the feet here on the 33-yard line, the tail would be back there somewhere around the 40-yard line of the opposition.
Though the dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago, you'd never know it at New York's biggest toy store. Here, dinosaurs are big business, generating millions of sales and enthralling kids of all ages. Candies, balloons, sweatshirts, you name it, somebody will stick a dinosaur on it.
He's killing it! Whoa!
Oh, you're gonna push him right off the cliff.
Whoa! And he's charging!
Oh, but he'll crush them all. He's too big, the T-Rex. That's the problem. That's why it was called a Rex.
No, but it's
the king of the all.
But it's 3 against 2.
You might think that you couldn't come up with anything new on dinosaurs. Well, one fellow did. He was a toy inventor, looking for something new for his own children's Christmas. So he asked them, and he came up with a moneymaker that has astounded the entire American toy industry. In 1985, Jim Alley needed a winner. Toys were a cutthroat business. For him, gloom already had set in.
It was the day after Christmas, and my kids had just gotten all the robots they could ever stand. And I knew that I was looking for the next thing that would make kids really excited. And I thought, gee, what was the one theme that kids didn't have any toys to play with? And it came to me right away that my kids, and when I was a child, the same thing, everybody likes dinosaurs. And the kids really need something with dinosaur toys. And you just couldn't give a kid a couple of dinosaurs to play with. You had to give them a reason to play with the dinosaurs. So I came up with the idea of dino riders.
Great.
Now these guys are all in exact scale to the dinosaurs. So this is like, these are like 5'10", and this is how big the dinosaur was, really big.
Really would be. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And all the dinosaurs are like, they're all in scale to each other then too.
Yes,
okay,
they are.
Great.
Mm-hmm. That's
I hope the good guys have a weapon that's as good as the bad guys. It got us into the international scene. It was a big thing for us in the United States. We developed a TV show that went on the air around Dino Riders. We were the first toy company to sell a video cassette to promote a product category. It made us a big-time company. Kids love Dino Riders. It's a concept that has been able to be interpreted around the world because every kid has that fantasy about dinosaurs and that they were real, but they're kind of mystical and they're kind of scary, but they were big and real and really, truly exciting.
You've come a long way to die, youngster.
Looking for someone? Shark breath?
I'll be back, youngster.
Dino Riders are here.
I look back at that and say, gee, I wish I could have another day after Christmas like that.
Well, movie moguls, too, found a way to make money out of dinosaurs. Countless films from King Kong to Fantasia fired imaginations around the globe. Mostly, it was the aggressive flesh eaters that were used to terrify the audiences, frequently in pursuit of buxom young ladies. The fact that the dinosaurs disappeared from Earth 64 million years before we appeared wasn't allowed to get in the way of a good story.
I'd like you to meet the family. Here are two members.
Ray Harryhausen is the grand old man of special effects, especially dinosaurs.
Here's the Allosaurus and the pterodactyl that carried Miss Welsh away. You take the basis of a real Allosaurus and you glamorize it like you would a movie star, like the eyebrows to cast shadows and sort of a demonic-looking expression on its face. And you give it a good mouthful of teeth, of course. The way you animate it dictates whether he's a villain or a hero. When you see him on the screen, 40 feet high, with a little figure of a real person next to him, I think you'll find that you wouldn't like to stay around while he examines you as a morsel. Dinosaurs, by their very appearance, dynamic creatures. You have to write the story around it to make use of them in the way that man sees them. We're not making a film for professors because they usually don't go to see these type of films. And we're making a film to entertain the public. So certain liberties are taken. But basically, the whole principle is to get them as accurate as possible.
Did you see that? If dinosaurs were so immense and so heavy, how in the world did they move around? Well, the dinosaur detectives are still finding out. The secret lies in their bones. Huge, yes, but they were well-designed marvels of the animal kingdom. Despite its length of 90 feet, Diplodocus moved smoothly and efficiently over the ground. It swung its long, straight, pillar-like legs in an easy stride. The neck and tail, held by powerful tendons running the length of its spine, added poise to the body as it moved. The clues were confirmed when, in 1980, dinosaur detectives began looking again at another detective trail neglected for 30 years. In Colorado, huge footprints, dinosaur trackways, caught Martin Lockley's eye. At this spot, the footprints left on a muddy plain by a passing herd of huge dinosaurs were frozen in time. The mud baked hard in the sun and later turned to stone. And millions of years later, the footprints were exposed in the bed of a river. Lockley is convinced that the tracks provide clues to how the dinosaurs moved in life.
Well, what we have right all around us here are a series of brontosaur trackways going parallel. These 5 animals were going in this direction as a group. These are the big back feet here, and these are the little front feet. And there's at least 5 animals about the same size, group of sub-adults that were moving together almost certainly as a herd. This is the very large back footprint of the brontosaur, and this is the small, almost hoof-shaped front footprint. And as they walked along, here's the front footprint, foot goes down, and the big back foot comes up behind it and almost oversteps it, marks the back end of the front footprint. There's at least 2 different ways that a 4-footed animal can walk. One is that it can move its alternate feet, that's front left and back right here, like this, and then like this, and then like this, and then like this. Another way that they can walk is to move both feet on one side, like this. So they move like that, and like that, and like that, and like that, and so forth. Certainly, I think that the large animals like the hippo and the rhino and the elephant make fairly good comparison with large 4-footed dinosaurs like the brontosaur or the triceratops.
The wealth of new evidence dinosaur detectives have discovered about the movements of these huge beasts is eagerly sought by others. Professional sculptors and artists have done their own investigations. Recreating full-size dinosaurs has turned Dave Thomas into something of a sleuth.
Basically, the problem is that you can't actually see the animal you're sculpting. Well, the first thing you have to do is your research, study the animal, and the first thing I did on these big bipedal ones was basically by reading tracks and then by putting the skeleton into those tracks and trying to see how it moved there. The first thing I found was that the dinosaur balances here at the hip joint with the tail balancing the front part, but he also uses the tail to balance left and right, so that the tail, the long tail there, is a tremendous balance lever, just like a wire walker's pole. I wanted to make it as far forward in the stride as I could. With the right foot down, of course, the tail is off on the left. And I was afraid that I had the tail too far over, in which case it would have fallen this way. But I trusted my instincts. We put all the pieces together, welded it, we picked it up with the crane and set it on its feet. The crane lines went slack and it stood, and I knew I'd gotten it right.
We don't find dinosaurs like this in the field. They don't come ready mounted. And so it becomes a problem sometimes to know how these things actually were put together. You can see the way he's menacing me, that he's interested in eating meat. He's got these big sharp teeth and they've got serrations on them. He's a meat eater. Now, meat eaters need to run after their dinner. He's got these nice long back legs, and the skeleton is balanced by virtue of that long tail. It's a racier looking animal. This is like a greyhound in comparison with an old cow. So if I was laying bets on this chap and this chap for acceleration, I'd give it to this guy every time. This one will be first away from the lights.
But for dinosaur detectives, working out just how fast the dinosaur moved is no game of chance. By piecing together the clues from the bones and tracks in Texas, Jim Farlow can calculate the speed of one particular dinosaur 130 million years ago.
Some of the most interesting information you can get from dinosaur trackways comes not from the individual footprints themselves, but from the spacing from one footprint to the next. One can estimate how fast a dinosaur was going from the length of the footprint as translated into the leg length and the length of the stride. Now, in a dinosaur that's walking, no particular hurry, just doing whatever dinosaurs do normally, the stride length is generally around 5 to 7 times the length of the individual footprints. In the case of the dinosaurs from the site in West Texas, where the stride length was 15 to 20 times the footprint length, one can estimate that they might have been running at speeds of as much as 25 miles per hour, which is pretty respectable by anybody's standards.
Jim Farlow believes that speeds like that have direct comparisons with the animals of today. The emu is a fast-running bird, and it leaves a footprint just like the tracks found in Texas.
Well, we're interested in animals like the emu here because the emu is the largest living flightless bird. It sometimes seems to me in some artists' reconstructions of dinosaurs, they almost make their faces too mammal-like. Whereas if you look at the face of a lizard or a crocodile or an emu, there's something alien about it, so something very unmammal-like. And so when I look at this fellow's face, I just can't help but sort of see through the feathers and almost think that I'm looking in the face of a dinosaur. I expect they had that sort of, that harshness, that glassy look to them. It's hard to put into words exactly what I'm seeing, but I almost seem to feel that I've got an insight into the psychology of a dinosaur from looking at the face of a bird like this.
To imagine fast-moving dinosaurs, we need direct comparisons like that. While the dinosaur detectives provide the clues, artists who work with them use their visual imagination to flesh out dinosaurs in action.
We sit at a table, the whole set of people at the paleontology department, and discuss these animals and what we think they do and what Dale thinks and how he feels about that animal. And I've got to just get that feeling of what he pictures this creature to be.
We had to begin with the beginnings, but see, I had the understanding that Miss Kish used to work with living models, and most of them are human beings of one kind or another, and so we had to work from the bones back out again.
And I could put a pin in and feel where it is and say, is that as thick as you think it should be? And we work like this. And he eventually comes up with how he wants his position, and then I start sculpturing the bones in this particular position. And from that point on, it's how those muscles attach on the bones, from here to there, this to that, and how fat those muscles are, how strong it has to be to hold up that big head, etc.
Three years ago, the bones of Carnotaurus, meat-eating bull, because of its bull-like horns and predatory habit, were found in South America. At 36 feet long and 2 tons in weight, the excitement for artist Stephen Zirkus was that with it, they found perfectly preserved imprints of its skin. It was for Zirkus the find of a lifetime.
Here we have a very unique situation where instead of restoring an animal that we have no idea what it externally would look like, not only were the bones found, but the actual skin impressions were found in patches from throughout the entire body, from the skull all the way onto the tail. One of the most exciting discoveries with the skin is that we found portions of skin on the skull as well as on portions of the body. This is the first time that we've ever had any skin actually preserved, revealing what the face of a dinosaur might look like. The skin impressions of Carnotaurus on the face as well as the rest of the body, it indicates that Carnotaurus, like other dinosaurs, had reptilian skin, scaly. In other words, it did not sweat.
And it didn't take long for the mass of new evidence, so painstakingly built up by dinosaur detectives, to reach a more commercial market. Dinosaurs have been repackaged. In museums, bones are being fleshed out. These touring dinosaur exhibitions pull in big crowds and big profits for both the museums and their commercial partners.
It's changed dramatically, hasn't it? This idea came to me in about 1982, mid-82. We tried to convince the museum directors that this would be a good idea to have animated dinosaurs in their museums. And it took about 2 years to convince them that that was indeed the case. From that point on, then they really took off. The popularity was just enormous. We broke record crowds in just about every museum we've been into. Museums worldwide now have them. We're throughout Europe, Australia. We're going to the Far East, all over the United States and Canada, and they're attracting record crowds.
How difficult was it to animate these figures?
That was the first step, Walter, to make sure that I had the exact input on how these creatures looked. And from that point, then, it was a matter of getting electronic technicians on board, sculptors and artists, because the sculptors make these things come to life.
The sad thing in one respect, though, is that the amount of commercialization that can occur around the subject of dinosaurs is a bit like a double-edged sword. In some respects, the commercial aspects of it are exciting because they draw people in and create a lot of interest and excitement. But in another way, there's also always the danger that the interest, the real science, can be trivialized. That in the end, the theme park manager or the store manager won't be so interested in the science. He'll be more interested in the terrifying image that the customers want to see. So never mind the details, let's just create the image. And that would really sell science down the river. In these days, when funds are very tight and very restricted, especially in university and museum research, that we actually need more support, perhaps from the commercial side, in order to foster the sort of research, the new discoveries that are so vital to make the subject that I work in so vibrant and so healthy as it has been in the past.
Under this university football stadium lie 100 tons of dinosaur bones. They've been gathering dust since 1962. Starved of funds, dinosaur detectives can't unlock the secrets of bones dug up 30 years ago.
How serious is the restriction of funds today, and what's it costing us in lack of information we might be getting otherwise?
Well, paleontology, digging dinosaurs, is incredibly cheap science. It really is. You don't need $1.6 billion per brontosaur. And although it's pure science, it certainly brings enormous enjoyment to millions and millions of people. I can't think of many other topics other than dinosaurs that cut across every age and class boundary. People love to think about dinosaurs. There isn't enough funding for that type of science that it just does a lot of good for the human brain. It used to be private individuals that funded digs. Andrew Carnegie spent a couple $100,000 to get a wonderful diplodocus out there about 6 miles on Sheep Creek. And Marsh's men and Cope's men came from private funds.
What is there out there still to learn that would hurt us not to know?
Well, my father used to ask me that question. He said, why do people pay money to support paleontology? And I thought a bit. My father's a musician. And I said, Dad, where do more people go in Washington, D.C.? The National Symphony with its wonderful symphony, or the National Museum with its dinosaurs? And he thought and said, well, a lot more people go to see the dinosaurs. There's just something wonderful, exciting, beautiful about the history of life. To really appreciate where we are today, the animals and the plants, you got to know where they've come from. That long, complex history, evolution and extinction, dinosaurs, mammals, turtles. And that gives us a profound sense of where we belong.
America used its wealth and enthusiasm to put dinosaurs in center field for all the world to see.
But the vision was of dull, lumbering creatures who did little but sleep and eat. And then out of China came the first fossilized dinosaur egg, and that led to a revolution. The idea that dinosaurs might have lived in family groups. And then more eggs were discovered, and the possibility that dinosaurs were loving, caring, intelligent creatures changed forever our view of dinosaurs and the world in which they lived.
Long before dinosaurs were discovered, we had, in a way, already invented them. Huge bones and teeth dug up in China 3,000 years ago weren't called dinosaurs, but dragons. In ancient China and then in Europe, dragons have persisted in myth and folklore. Dragon or dinosaur, new evidence again from the East, tells a different story. The legend of dinosaurs as brutal, lumbering beasts is no more. In 1922, an American team was out searching for the origins of man in a remote part of China. Being an American expedition, it had an avalanche of cars, trucks, and 75 camels. Led by the flamboyant Roy Chapman Andrews, they were so well heeled, the Chinese government thought they were spies. After bandits, breakdowns, and the weather, the fossil hunters found a treasure trove. These early dinosaur detectives looking for human bones stumbled on a hoard of perfectly preserved dinosaur eggs, the first clue that dinosaurs lived in family groups. Carefully packed in camel hair, the eggs were sent back to New York. Eggs were a beginning. Dinosaurs must have had a social life, but what was it like? The question remained unanswered for 50 years.
This is the first time I've been in this place since.
Then in 1978, an eager young fossil hunter stumbled on clues which would transform our ideas about dinosaurs. Jack Horner was looking for eggs and baby dinosaurs in America, but he didn't find them right away.
Really began, huh? Yeah. I went to the American Museum in New York City and looked through their collections, looked at the material that had come from Mongolia, and got an idea of what baby dinosaurs ought to look like. And people were writing papers about baby dinosaurs being extremely rare, and so I took it upon myself to go find some.
At first he had no luck, but then a chance visit to Marion Brunwald's fossil shop gave him the break he needed.
And well, I said, I got some of these funny little bones, so I showed him some of these bones, and he wanted to know if I had more of them. I said, yeah, over at the house.
She produced 2 small pieces, and one was the thigh bone of a duck-billed dinosaur, and one was what I believe was a rib fragment. But the thigh bone was the wrong size. It was the right size for a baby. She had a coffee can full of little pieces, and what we were looking at were, as far as I knew, North America's first true baby dinosaurs.
Horner had been searching in the wrong place. Dinosaurs nested in the hills, not in the valleys. When he realized that, he found whole colonies of breeding dinosaurs.
Jack, you've got a reputation of the keenest eye in paleontology, of being able to pick out things from a bunch of rocks like this. How about showing me how you do it? Pick out one for me. I want to see an eggshell.
Well, let's go for a walk and see if we can find something. See, here we have what, eggshell fragments.
Those?
Yeah.
Well, now, how in the world did you see that? I would never see those little tiny things.
Eggshell is really pretty common out here. In fact, it's one of the most common fossils we have in the formation. But when we find a real concentration of thousands and thousands of pieces, then we know we have a nest.
Mm-hmm.
And what we've been doing is combing the areas looking for other nests, and we've come up with 8 more. So we know that these dinosaurs nested in colonies.
Horner had discovered the eggs of a plant-eating dinosaur. It grew up to 20 feet in length and produced eggs in clutches, 20 at a time. Weighing in at about a ton, how did these dinosaurs incubate their eggs? Did they care for and feed their young, or simply abandon them? The answers have revolutionized our ideas. The name Jack Horner gave this plant eater, Maiasaura, sums up how he believes dinosaurs behaved.
We don't know how long. Can you tell me what this is?
It's nest of a Dinosaur.
Nest of a Maiasaura. Maiasaura means the good mother lizard. When did Maiasaurs live?
A real long time ago?
80 million years ago, right? Do you think dinosaurs sat on their eggs to incubate them?
Nope.
Like birds do?
No.
Why not?
Crush them.
That's right. They'd be flat, wouldn't they? That's right. So, what we think is that the mother dinosaur, covered the eggs with vegetation, and then the vegetation would begin to rot. And when things rot, it creates heat. And so that heat would have warmed the eggs. That's a pretty neat way to do it, isn't it?
Now, what are your clues that have led you to believe that the mother dinosaurs cared for their young?
The ends of the bones of the babies in the nest are not very well formed. They would have had a very large cartilaginous cap, which means that the babies couldn't walk. And they're little plant eaters, and therefore if they couldn't walk, we assume that the parent would bring food to them. We find some other stuff of these dinosaurs too. In fact, we find dinosaur stuff. We call it coprolites. You know what coprolites are? Yeah, dinosaur stuff. Yeah. We find those in the nesting grounds. And so we can look at those coprolites, and we can tell what the dinosaurs ate. And we know that the baby dinosaurs were eating berries, like you see the mother feeding them. We have what we call a coprolite, which is dinosaur dung.
Oh.
And we have some people working on it. It looks just like a sort of a black rock.
My God.
But actually what we have here is a rock that is just loaded with plant material, all this black in here. And it's mixed together with the sediment.
Well, now, as a dinosaur detective, that looks like a rock to me.
It certainly does.
And, but what would make you look at it like that?
What we were finding were these sort of big blobs of what appears to be crushed up plant material. It's very rare out here, but we're only finding it in the nesting ground, the nesting horizons. Another clue is the shape of the skull. When we look at the baby dinosaur skulls, they have the same features that we see in birds and mammals. They have very big eyes, big brain, very short snout. It's the characters that make things like Mickey Mouse cute. What is different about them?
Their noses.
Yeah, their nose is very different. Now, if we look at the adult has relatively small eyes and a big, long snout, right? And we look at the babies, they have big eyes and a relatively short snout, right? Puppies are like that. If you look at a brand new puppy, they have a short nose and big eyes. They're cute, right? Some scientists think that animals feed their young if they're cute. And that's why we get fed when we're little. Because we're kind of cute, right? Yeah, well, when you get to be 18, then you're not cute anymore, I guess.
Only now are we beginning to ask the questions about dinosaurs that we naturally ask about our animal kingdom. For if they lived in families, how did they communicate with one another? David Weissample thinks he knows, at least for a close relative of the good mother known as Parasaurolophus. This plant eater was 30 feet long, and on its head it had one feature that seemed made for sound, a crest 3 feet long. How did you come to this theory that the dinosaur made sound through what would look like a horn?
Right. Well, we've got this skull. This is an animal called Parasaurolophus. And all this is bone. So that we know that when the animal breathed in, the air came in through the nostrils, went all the way to the back of the crest, and then came down this bit here, came to the back of the throat, down the windpipe into the lungs. And when it breathed out, it reversed that pattern, came back here and out here. So that if you put some sort of voice box, a sound generator here, the sound's pushed all the way through the crest and has to make that kind of sound. You can do some calculations, do some arithmetic to figure out what kinds of sounds they might have made. But the real clincher is to actually take this kind of configuration, this kind of shape, this skeletal stuff, and then make yourself a horn as well. Okay. This is a big contraption that I've made, which is the same size, it's life size, of the crest of this duck-billed dinosaur, Parasaurolophus. Okay, here we go. Pretty low note, right?
Yeah, can I try it?
Hang on a second. Well, you guys know how this would go on a Parasaurolophus?
Yeah.
Let me show you on Brent here, all right? Brent, turn your head a little bit, all right? Sort of go like this, right? Where the voice box is down here, kind of where Brent's is. And I go all the way out to here and then back down and out through his nose right there. Right? You guys want? Well, Brent, you want to try it?
Me too.
Stand up. This is the end. Buzz your lips. There you go. Whoa.
Was that for real, or was that just for the kids?
Well, no, that's actually based on a fair bit of fact from skeletal remains that we have of that particular dinosaur.
But science, of course, wants to know more. In North America, dinosaur bones get VIP treatment on the latest X-ray scanners. This is the only complete skull of a honking hadrosaur. Y-sample dare not cut it open, but the X-ray pictures let him see the horn from the inside.
What we want to do today is to investigate roughly this part of the crest right here, because there's a chance that there are intricate side passages in here which would change the kinds of sound that the animal would make. Well, I think the business about the central chamber extending so far up the crest is going to make a real difference in terms of the kinds of sounds that this animal can make. Yeah. Certainly not as simple as originally anticipated. The business of actually taking pictures from the inside out is something that is not generally available for the kinds of work that we're doing. And so this provides a picture, a window on the anatomy that's not available otherwise. So yeah, it's a tremendous value. Let me ask you this, though. A dinosaur like Parasaurolophus would want to talk to, if it was a baby, it would want to talk to the grown-ups.
His wife.
Husband and wife would want to talk to each other. And they'd want to say things like, they'd want to give out warning calls. Or they'd want to say, come over here, it's time to eat.
It's time to go to bed.
Or it's time to go to bed. Or buzz off, I want to be left alone, things like that.
I love you.
Maybe even I love you.
Dinosaur detectives are now convinced that dinosaurs had more ways to communicate than just by making a noise. During courtship especially, they would have used color and adornment to get their message across.
We're all familiar with certain kinds of display structures. Peacocks have wonderful showy tails which attract females. In deer, there are the magnificent antlers of the red deer stag and so on and so forth. These are our display structures. And a number of dinosaurs had structures which were first and foremost very conspicuous. Many of the duck-billed dinosaurs had crests on the top of their heads. The horned dinosaurs had wonderful shields behind the skulls. These are structures which were clearly meant to be seen.
This dinosaur is called Centrosaurus, sharp-pointed reptile, because of the horns on the tip of its snout. A plant eater which topped the scales at 3 tons. During the mating season, it was capable of a fearsome display. Its 3-foot collar was rimmed with triangular lumps of horn-covered bone. By vigorously nodding its head, it warned off all but the most pugnacious of rivals. Not that this was without risk. With these, as with other dinosaurs, things could sometimes get out of hand.
I've been looking at injuries in duck-billed dinosaurs, and these features can tell us many interesting things about the lifestyle of these dinosaurs. And this animal has a series of ribs that have all been broken in a straight line and all rehealed to the same degree. We know that this injury occurred at the same time. And what I think is happening here is that rival males during mating times would fight over females and may have kicked at each other with the hind feet, causing these kind of injuries.
And even when you've secured a mate, there are perils still ahead.
Now, in a normal duck-billed dinosaur, the spine is nice and straight. And as you can see with this specimen, it has been buckled and pulled over to one side, as if a great weight has pressed straight down upon it. I've come to the conclusion that these injuries were caused during mating and where accidental injuries occurred during the actual act of mating. Now, these types of injuries only occur in adults and are only reflected in the very proximal or base of the tail, which is where the reproductive organs would be in this area here. I never find multiple injuries. Like, I never find an animal that has mated, been injured, and then re-injured itself. So it looks like it happened once during the animal's life. Maybe the injury made it shy away from mating in the future. Who knows?
Clue by clue, the evidence mounts on the habits and social life of dinosaurs, and not just from the odd skeleton. Here in the Badlands of Alberta, Phil Curry found clues that stretched across an area the size of a football field. In 1978, his team discovered a vast bone bed of 500 centrosaurs, apparently struck down in the prime of life. But how could this have happened, and what did it mean?
Well, bone beds are actually quite common, but it's not very often we find bone beds like this where you have only one species represented. Because of the large numbers of specimens here and the fact that they didn't come from very far upstream, it's most likely that these animals died trying to cross the river in flood. Now, this may seem like a rather fantastic explanation, but in fact there are modern analogies that show it still happens today. And in fact it happens quite frequently. Not that long ago, 10,000 caribou died in northern Quebec.
Thousands of caribou carcasses line the banks of the Kaniapiskau River in northern Quebec. Inuit work crews have started collecting the caribou out of the water before it freezes in 2 or 3 weeks. The decaying carcasses were strewn along a 50-kilometer stretch of the river and are now creating a major pollution threat to aquatic life. Biologists who inspected the riverbank were shocked.
Whenever you get large groups of herbivorous animals, whether they're dinosaurs or mammals, together and they're moving in some kind of a migratory pattern, they're likely to encounter some kind of a natural disaster that will wipe out large numbers of them during the course of the migration. Given the evidence we have now from Arctic Canada and Alaska, there's a very good chance that dinosaurs were taking advantage of the high plant productivity in the Arctic, because during the summer months, with 24 hours of sunlight during the daytime, plants just produce so much food that animals will always try and take advantage of it.
Covering up to 70 miles a day, the vast centrosaur herds swept northwards in the summer toward the Arctic feeding grounds. In the autumn, as the days began to draw in, a huge migration southward would begin. This cycle of life would be repeated, echoing the seasons 70 million years ago. Today, the remains of huge herds of dinosaurs are being discovered around the world. In Montana, a vast bone bed tells Jack Horner what happened to the young myosaurs after they left the nest.
It gives us a social picture on a grand scale. This is just a tiny piece of one of our bone beds. What it is a mass accumulation of Maiasaur skeletons ranging from yearlings to full-grown, and our conservative estimate is 10,000 individuals. The story, that we've been able to put together is that we have these large groups of herbivores that are migrating north to south up and down this thin piece of West America.
What was this place like at the time these dinosaurs roamed these plains?
80 million years ago, the Rocky Mountains were here, but they were about 30 miles west of here. And then there was a broad plain that came from the Rocky Mountains and extended all the way into eastern Montana. It was about 300 miles, and then came to that inland seaway extended from the Gulf of Mexico to the Arctic Ocean.
If you're one of a herd of, say, 1,000 hadrosaurs moving around the countryside, you couldn't stay in one place for very long, simply because that number of animals would eat themselves out of house and home very quickly indeed. So you follow the food resource. Well, an obvious parallel would be caribou. So really one can envisage the herds of hadrosaurs moving much like caribou do, with perhaps the tyrannosaurs being similar to wolves, following the herds, picking off the lame, the infirm, and the young, and having a very similar relationship that we see today in caribou and wolves.
Guided by an acute sense of smell and aided by stereoscopic vision, the Tyrannosaurus would close in. Its prey secured, this superbly designed killing machine would tear apart its catch and down it in huge gulps. Some killers are smaller but are no less fearsome. In 1964, John Ostrom made a startling discovery. A new type of killer, a small lithe animal with a razor-sharp weapon, a wickedly hooked claw on its hind foot. He called it Deinonychus, terrible claw.
But Deinonychus certainly opened up a whole new window in viewing these animals. This animal clearly indicated extreme agility, activity, perhaps even intelligence, but these were very, very sophisticated animals, unlike our previous image of what dinosaurs were about.
Here were dinosaurs at their most terrifying. They weren't just active killers. They hunted in packs.
But we found the remains of at least 4 and probably 5 different predators, Deinonychus, that apparently were killed in the process of attacking a much larger prey animal, that these animals apparently hunted in packs, like wolves, which makes a lot of sense when you realize that the animal that they were trying to, and did kill, was 5 or 10 times larger than the killer.
To combat the threat of agile predators, giants like this plant-eater Tyrannosaurus had to move fast too or perish. Some dinosaur detectives see this as evidence that they were just like the active mammals of today. Others are not so sure. The giant Brachiosaurus may provide some clues to the pace of dinosaurs.
Can you really apply these arguments to animals this size, a 40 or 30-ton dinosaur? I think not. I think there are actually models for these sorts of creatures which much more fit them to being a classic reptile. We know that the head was able to be craned up some 30 to 35 feet above the ground to reach the tops of the trees they fed on. Now, if the animal has its brain and head at that height, then there's an enormous distance that the blood has to travel to get up to the brain, and the heart will therefore have to generate a great deal of pressure to push the blood up that height. That gives the animals potential for a great deal of activity. So these actually are pretty wondrous animals, because they're combining some of the best attributes of the animals that are so active today, the mammals and birds, with the economy of lifestyle that's associated with a reptile. Basically, they're dinosaurs, and that makes them something very special.
It was an egg that led Jack Horner to discover that dinosaurs were complex animals. They cared for and reared their young. It was bones like these that led an inquiring Bob Bacher to an even more radical idea. Until he came along, most dinosaur detectives assumed that dinosaurs were like lizards and crocodiles, were cold-blooded, in other words. But in the 1970s, he began a revolution. He came up with an idea, well, that's still controversial today. Bob, your idea is that these things were warm-blooded, huh?
Well, absolutely. I grew up in the 4th grade with brontosaurs like this in the Life magazine. Gray, stupid, slow, up to its armpits in some fetid swamp. But when I got to studying the guy, I found out that nose to tail and shoulder to toes, they had it all wrong. It saw in color. And animals that see in color have bright colors to attract mates. So don't think of brontosaurus as gray. Think of the bull brontosaurus in some brilliant crimson or bright blue or a metallic green to attract a mate. Now, if you get into the heart of the matter, I mean, literally, I'm going to crawl into the cardiac chamber here, you see something astonishing. And when the penny dropped and I realized this, I just kicked myself. Why didn't I think of this before? This chamber here in the front of the chest, well, there's only one organ there, the heart.
Let me come up there and have
Sure.
a closer look at that.
Have a heart-to-heart here. This gigantic chamber housed a heart that would be hundreds and hundreds of pounds. Today, only warm-blooded active animals have huge hearts. And going aft, the hip socket, wonderful joint, designed to let this whole hind leg swing backwards and forwards in an efficient, well, like a pendulum.
This suggesting that the animal was far more active than our idea of this sloth-like creature.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Evolution is very careful. Evolution doesn't build in excess stuff. It's not like the Pentagon. There are no cost overruns in Brontosaurus. Natural selection worked on this beast to give it the knee and the thigh and the lungs and the heart that it needed. And it gave them warm-blooded specifications. Pound for pound, there's more strength in these legs than there is in a modern elephant. And much more strength than in a cold-blooded tortoise. This is a biological machine designed for pumping, for moving with tremendous activity.
Well, school was never like this in my day. I'll tell you, now with the use of songs and dances and games and visuals of all kinds, these youngsters, through the use of dinosaurs, are learning about the world around them in a way that's absolutely astounding to, to dinosaurs like me. The work of dinosaur detectives has turned dinosaurs into learning tools. Children all over the world can now explore their fantasies and learn at the same time.
They get interested in them as early as 4, and then at 5 they're very mystical, and then after that I think they start getting more interested in learning why did they die out? You know, why aren't they around anymore? Where did they live? You know, all of that sort of thing. I think they become more interested in the facts afterwards, but the young children, the kindergartners, are just interested in them just for life's sake.
I think any teacher probably jumps at the chance, because if you've got something that is a motivator, I mean, whatever it is you use, and this, I've never met a child who wasn't interested in dinosaurs in some way. And the more you read and the more you hear, the more interested you become, because there are mysteries involved, and I think mysteries are always something that turn us on.
In southern France, in the sleepy town of Esperanza, the tranquility is deceptive. Here, too, lies a mystery that has captured the imagination of the local community.
Gwen. Hi, Gwen.
It's being unraveled by these children and their very special teacher as they piece together the clues in the classroom in the hills nearby.
Gwen, qu'est-ce que c'est?
Just outside the town is a dinosaur nesting site which the children have made their own. So many eggs have been found that it has put Esperanza on the map and made these junior dinosaur detectives the talk of France.
All children are interested in dinosaurs. That's true. Everyone is aware of it, from 7 to 77. Those in Esperanza in particular, because they have had the opportunity to touch the bones and the eggs on the site.
Les os, les œufs. Superbe! Prêtez-moi ça là. Oh, superbe!
The eggs are those of a giant Hypsilosaurus. Yet for all their size, they must have tiptoed with great daintiness between nests crowded with babies. Such discoveries may bring fame and fortune to Esperanza. The eggs may be the key to its economic future.
Actuellement, ce que vous avez vu aujourd'hui...
In fact, what you've seen today is only an exhibition, a small temporary exhibition. But the town council, the mayor, have much more important plans for exhibiting the whole of the collections. We hope to create a museum at the upper valley of the Aude, a regional museum of great importance, which is likely to bring a revival, a lift, to the economy of Esperanza, which has great need of it. And we think that this museum will attract many tourists, many people from all over Europe.
In America, too, the thrill of a fossil find can capture the minds of children. Some already are dinosaur detectives in the making.
Isn't that where you found yours there? Yeah. Well, sit down. I'd like to hear more about how you found it.
One day, me and my dad was walking down this creek, and I saw these teeth, like right in here, sticking out in the rock.
That's a pretty neat job. These dinosaurs are pretty interesting. This one that you found, Thad, is a plant-eating dinosaur. It's probably about 113 million years old or so. This other one that you found was a plant-eater as well. This was a little baby. It was found washed out to sea and is only about maybe 98 million years old or something like that. Why do you like dinosaurs?
I wanted to find out what animals ate what other kind of animals.
What do you want to be when you grow up, Thad?
I'm going to be a dinosaur finder, paleontologist, scientist that finds bones.
Well, you know, a lot of people find fossil dinosaurs when they're just out looking. A lot of them. You don't have to be a paleontologist to find one. You can just be someone that likes to look.
From the earliest pioneers, it's been dedicated amateurs who have often made the most spectacular finds. Searching out dinosaur bones is a passion of Kathy Wankel. Her obsession paid off one weekend while exploring the Badlands of Montana.
It was Labor Day weekend of 1988. My husband and I were hiking around this area. I had spotted a small ridge of white sticking out of the dirt. We walked over about in this area. I knew it was a dinosaur bone. I could see the bone marrow, and I had picked up fossils before, and I just knew it was, and I was really hoping it was a T-Rex. I just had a feeling that it might be. I don't know if it was premonition or what, but I was real excited about it. I thought it was a mega find. That's what I called my dad and told him it was a mega find. And he said, oh, it's probably just some old cow bones. He didn't have faith in me.
Jack Horner did, and Kathy Wankel's T-Rex has become the latest star exhibit at the Museum of the Rockies.
Good amateur paleontologists are extremely important. There are only a few of us paleontologists in Montana, and the state is 600 miles long and 400 miles wide, and there are lots and lots of areas that have good fossils in them. So eyes out looking for us are what we need. In fact, in our museum, we have 6 or 7 big exhibits, and all of the specimens we have were found by amateurs. The important thing is that the amateur bring it to the museum rather than take it home and put it in his garage.
How did you first get interested in dinosaur bones?
Oh, I think it dates back to the uranium days when we were prospecting for uranium. I found this big humerus, that's the upper arm bone, and it's now in the Smithsonian, but finding this big bone kind of set us off on that.
I've been looking around this quarry, for instance, and it looks to me like bones look like rocks. I don't know how an amateur would ever tell one from a rock.
Bones do look like rocks, and you have to learn how to distinguish a rock. A bone has cell structure, just like our bones in our body. You know, we have cell structure. Wood has grain. So I look for that cell structure, and it's there if you look for it. And it's just like anything else, you learn to know what you're looking for.
But you can see that just with the naked eye as you walk across a bunch of rock?
Yes, after a while. Mm-hmm.
Vivian Jones has walked these hills of Colorado for 40 years. Her numerous discoveries have helped dinosaur Jim Jensen uncover some major finds. How did you discover this particular site?
Well, I was looking over this little opening on this hillside, and I found this very strange shaped bone, and I did not know what it was, so I decided to take it home and put it up until I saw Jim the next time to get it identified.
What were you doing with them?
Well, at first we were just kind of storing them, not knowing what to do with them, and then Jim came by, and he was our savior.
In what sense was he your
savior?
savior?
He just asked us if we would work with him if we were to find anything, and we were more than happy to do that.
And as a result of that, they made a tremendous contribution to science, actually, because of the finds they made. I was able to open up 4 quarries in these mountains and recover the most new dinosaurs that anyone's ever found.
Today, chance discoveries are being helped by science. Dinosaur hunters use technology to detect what the eye cannot see. That's the theory, anyway. In practice, finding dinosaurs is still, shall we say, a hit-and-miss affair.
Got a misfire, wait a minute.
Roland, you know it's all your fault that we got involved in all this confusion
Wait
here.
a minute. You led me on by saying paleontology was in the Dark Ages and we needed to do some real science.
Well, that we were in the Dark Ages then, and I think we still are.
Ready? I'm ready, arm it.
Ready? Seriously, this all began when I gave a seminar at Los Alamos and challenged scientists like Roland and others here into helping us conduct this excavation. The specific problem that I posed was, can we see the bones in the ground before we excavate them? And the reason I needed to know the answers was that we had 10 feet of rock to remove before we could get down to bone level if this skeleton were to continue into the hill the way we projected. Okay, Cliff, show us some bones here. What do you got?
Time will tell whether high-tech can reveal all about this particular dinosaur. It's called Seismosaurus, and it may turn out to be the biggest dinosaur ever. But that's not all. The bones found so far are in the same position they had in life, articulated, and that's a crucial lead for dinosaur detectives.
Probably the most important feature about this skeleton is the fact that it's articulated. The reason we like to have articulated skeletons is that it allows us to know exact positions for each bone, and that's important in our descriptions and analytical work. In this case, the articulation was also important because we have a series of stomach stones that were found in direct association with the bones, like the stones in this circle, which are the gastroliths that were used for grinding food. They represent the substitute for teeth. In the sauropod dinosaurs, the teeth were about the size of my finger. They couldn't grind food. Instead, all they could do was rake food off the vegetation. And there was no grinding mechanism at all in the jaws. The only capacity for processing food mechanically was with gastroliths, grinding in a grinding mill so that the food would be crushed and processed, readied for chemical digestion in the stomach. And it's a fair estimate to say that they ate around a ton, or 2,000 pounds of food in a day. They processed that much plant material. Like any scientific investigation, there's always a wild card. The wild card in our study is the occurrence of this gastrolith, which is so much larger than elsewhere. We were astonished. This one weighs over 2 pounds, and it's 5 or 6 times larger than this one. One idea we have is that perhaps this was the one that caused the extinction of this individual when he choked to death.
However that Seismosaurus died, giants like him survived, generation after generation, for 130 million years. But how did they manage to survive for so long?
In fact, all dinosaurs would fit in the same size range as our known range of living and fossil mammals. So the question really ought to be, why aren't more mammals dinosaur size? Because they certainly can get to be that big. Well, I think it's something to do with the difference in reproduction between mammals and dinosaurs. Large mammals, like elephants, only have one young every 3 or 4 years, whereas dinosaurs we know could lay 20 eggs at a go and may have bred more often. As the Ice Ages, the large mammals were the ones that went out, probably because when they had a bad winter or something, and many of them died, they couldn't rapidly rebuild their populations. Now, a dinosaur laying 20 eggs, sure, under most conditions, most of those young would die, but it would mean they had the capacity to rebuild populations quickly, which would be impossible for a mammal.
Today, those dinosaur corpses have brought a not always welcome new enterprise. For hard on the heels of the amateurs has come a new gold rush. Professional dinosaur hunters like Peter Larson walk a thin line between making money out of dinosaur finds and scientific research.
Well, there is a bit of a controversy about being able to actually sell dinosaur bones. Actually, this is a way that I've found to be able to do what I want with my life. Those of us who work in this company have a real commitment to science. It's our thing. We not only supply specimens of dinosaurs to museums who otherwise would not be able to afford to get them, or perhaps places like Japan, which really has no dinosaur skeletons. The only way they can see a real dinosaur is to buy one. And the children who live in Japan have just as much right to see a dinosaur as the children who live here in the United States. And here we have an abundance of dinosaurs, and we can supply dinosaurs to those museums where they otherwise would not be able to have them.
In the summer of 1990, Peter Larson came up with the find of his life.
Well, this turns out to be the largest Tyrannosaurus that has ever been found. We kind of like to name our fossils when we find them to give them sort of a personality. It was found by Susan Hendrickson, so we came up with the name Sue. Sue is going to be the cornerstone of our museum, which we've been working on, in fact, which I've been dreaming of since I was a little kid. And Sue will be mounted in Hill City, South Dakota in our new museum.
Although Larson didn't know it at the time, Sue may be a fitting name for this, the largest tyrannosaur ever. Its size probably meant that Sue was a female and more than able to stand her ground against a smaller male. She needed to be larger to nurture the eggs inside her. Such new information is grist to the mill for amateur dinosaur enthusiasts. Tom Strauss, here in the shed at the bottom of his garden, is an engineer by day. His obsession with dinosaurs lacks the resources for anything but a one-man exhibition. But his homemade movies have won him a delighted, if limited, audience.
When I was a kid, I was fascinated by dinosaurs by the original motion picture of King Kong. From that moment on, I had an urge to do my own motion picture. The project started off when I was in high school. At the time, money was very scarce. I used these wire keys from a guitar of mine. And primarily, most of this is from bicycle chains and washers, nuts and bolts. That was generally what was available for me. And in order to keep this creature suspended in air while you're animating them one frame at a time. In the beginning, I had no experience on it, and I had to learn, and I kind of felt the best way to learn is to do it. At the time, people felt that the dinosaurs were very cold-blooded, and I really didn't believe it. And I wanted also to project these animals to show that they had feelings toward their offspring. I knew that the fight scene was terrifying, and I did have an audience of kids viewing my film. When I was showing this to this group of kids, and I took my eye off the screen and watched the faces on the kids, and especially the point where the fight was going on, and some of the reactions from these kids were they were covering their faces and they turned their head. It totally electrified me.
Dinosaurs to kids are particularly exciting because they're bigger than houses and things, and they're exciting to kids, and they're scary, but they don't have to worry about them anymore because they're gone. So it's something they can talk about and feel like they're their friends of this big 60-foot-tall brachiosaurus, but at the same time, they don't have to worry about getting stepped on by one.
My favorite dinosaur is Tyrannosaurus Rex. They're interesting and they're big, so big. They're real neat and fascinating. They're big and scary.
Stimulating that imagination is a young people's dig and campsite at Egg Mountain. It's an open-air workshop inspired by Jack Horner.
We saw some children out there today, a very bright little 9-year-old fellow. Tell us something about the camp. I mean, what is it exactly?
Well, it's run as a field school. It's a place where interested people can come out and really be part of the research, be part of what really goes on here.
Since Jack Horner first discovered dinosaur eggs in America in 1978, hundreds of children of all ages have spent time on Egg Mountain. For Horner, it's the climax of a long career.
What would you like to be remembered for?
Probably the behavior. That's been what I've been working on all this time.
Behavior of the dinosaurs?
Behavior of the dinosaurs, yes.
This is what dinosaurs are good for: education and learning about life and the history of life, so that we know what our world is about and what's going to happen to our world. They should be used for research and education. They should be used to encourage people like Johnny and Thad into science.
And of course, the biggest joy in fossils is the actual discovery, actually finding these rocks which no one's ever seen before, these evidence of ancient life. And we just can't deny that to the young kids, because that's what really gets you hooked on fossils and really gets you hooked on science. And we've got to allow them to be able to go out and look for these fossils and find them, because without the kids, there's no future in paleontology.
Bob, of all your discoveries out here, what would you like to be most remembered for?
Wow. I guess helping to give dinosaurs better respect. That they weren't cold-blooded, stupid, gray, dim-witted, bad mothers and stuck in miasmic swamps. They were lively, they were colorful, incredibly interesting.
Jack Horner and others revolutionized our idea of dinosaurs. Out went the idea that they were lumbering, slumbering giants. Now we know that they were among the most successful creatures that ever lived on this planet. But if that's the case, why did they die out? Well, some think it was a mass extinction. Others are not so sure. And did all the dinosaurs die out, or perhaps did some survive in a different form? For some clues to the death of the dinosaurs, join me for our next episode.